right now on Amplified.
The opportunities are really limitless with an engineering degree. So I think for anyone with a curious mind and of a curious nature, you can kind of shape your career to be any sort of industry you want.
Hi there, my name is Dusty Rhodes and you're welcome to Amplified, the Engineers Journal podcast, and the very first in a special mini-series we're calling An Engineer Like Me. Over 3 episodes, we're going to be focusing on the critical transition from college to the professional world and giving you a real-world perspective should you be considering or you're just entering the world of engineering. We're going to be tackling essential questions about what the first month on the job truly feels like, how to bridge the gap between academic theory and industry, and why proactive involvement in societies and awards can accelerate your career. To start with, we're joined by 2 exceptional young engineers, Jennifer Smith, a manufacturing operations engineer at AbbVie, and Denis Hardi, a QA engineer at H&MV. Hi Jennifer and Denis, how are you?
Hi Dusty, how are you getting on?
How you doing, Denis?
Good. Hello from Finland.
So, Denis, let me start off then and say, as one of our fresh new engineers, why are you in Finland?
Oh, good question. Thank you very much. So, I'm actually based in Finland now on site, working on this project substation, electrical substation for the data center here in Kouvola place. So it's just 2-hour drive from Helsinki. I was actually all around Europe before this. So I was in Norway before this project for like 20 weeks and just fresh in Finland at the moment and trying to get this project across the line. So who knows where I'm going to be in a few months, you know how it is. Did
you expect to be saying things like, who knows where I'll be in 2 months' time when you got into engineering?
Definitely not. No, well, I had a lot of internships around Ireland when I was studying my bachelor's, right? And it was traveling around Ireland, but I've seen opportunities, for renewable energy, what I studied, in different countries, but I never experienced actually that I'll be staying in one company and then traveling around the world for a few months, so it is a rich experience, to say at least.
Give me a little bit about your background and about your connection to Ireland. Did you grow up here or fill me in?
Oh, yeah. Well, my background comes from actually Croatia, right? So I've been living there for 19 years and then moved to Ireland to work a bit. I did not know if I'm going to stay there permanently or not. I say there because as we speak, I'm in Finland, right? So I was in Waterford at the beginning and then moved to Limerick, right? And then went back to Waterford just before I actually was sent to work abroad. So a few different places around Ireland. I was in Cork as well during my summer internship, so I explored Ireland a bit. But here we are now outside of Ireland and outside of European Union a few weeks ago. So I did not expect to be so much outside the country. I love the experience. But I suppose with the international background comes international experience, right?
So Jennifer, tell us a little bit about what you do.
So I'm a manufacturing operations engineer in AbbVie. So they're a biopharmaceutical company and I'm based in their North Dublin facility at the moment. So it's an oral solid dosage plant. So they make tablets in this facility.
An oral solid dosage?
Yes.
You mean a pill?
So tablets, pills and capsules. So
very good. Okay. I've never heard it described it like that. That's a very engineering way. It's a very engineering way of saying it. So listen, tell me, what kind of problems then do you have to solve in your job?
So there's a lot of, obviously because it's pharmaceuticals and people are consuming it and it's for medicinal purposes, we've to be very conscious of the quality going through the factory and make sure that we're complying with all the regulations, and when those change that we adapt to those, and then making sure that we optimize the processes to get the best throughput to our patients.
And why did you get into that particular part of engineering, Jennifer?
So I did a couple of internships while I was in university. One of those was with a pharmaceutical manufacturing equipment supply company. So that was probably my favorite out of the 4 internships that I did. So when I was in that internship, I got exposure. So they were supplying equipment to different sites such as AbbVie, Janssen, Pfizer, Kerry Group. So I got experience on site and I loved being in and around the pharmaceutical stratosphere. So I knew when I finished college, I wanted to explore a career in the pharmaceutical industry.
How does the internship work? Because Dennis mentioned it. I'm going to ask him about this as well in a second. But how does that work? It sounds like you're kind of given a little taste of all of these different types of engineering, and then you can choose your favorite.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I think internships will really shape the way you can kind of take your career, because I did an internship with a pharmaceutical manufacturing supply company. I did one with a precision engineering company that manufactured stainless steel components. I did one with a civil engineering company, and I did one with a wire drawing in a material science environment as well. So those were very different. Even my degree, my background is in mechanical engineering, and going into a civil engineering company, I was in their mechanical team, but I kind of got a taste for what civil works was like, and I kind of knew then what I did and didn't want to do from those internships. You kind of realize what appeals to you and what maybe you find interesting but maybe isn't for you long term. So I think getting internships while you're at university is a great way to then have a better idea of what you want to do once you finish college.
Dennis, you mentioned that you did some internships as well. How did it work for you?
Oh yeah, I would absolutely agree with Jennifer there on almost every point. Yeah, internships give you rich experience, right? But also example that whatever you're studying in college, right, it might or might not be applicable to what you're going to be doing one day, right? And from there, you're going to get understanding of, okay, this is something that I'm really interested in. What is this about? And what can I apply what I learned so far? So basically at the first year during the summer, I had basically summer internship, which actually lasted for 6 months. Transferred a bit during my college period as well, because there's some still documentation that I could have been working on. So I did combine heat and power containers with engines, basically like a backup powered by gas. They would produce heat and electricity and so on for hospitals, hotels, and so on. So that was, rich experience coming from the, renewable energy and electrical engineering background. In the second year, it was interesting experience as well, because then I said, okay, so that was a bit, kind of high voltage systems. Let's go into the low voltage systems. So I went into the AbbVie company, right? AbbVie in Limerick, where I was studying. I did 3 months there. Was it 3 months, 2.5, 3 months there in like a chips, right? So basically manufacturing was done in another country. They would send it back here and we would do calibration, right? Diagnostics and so on. So that was, interesting to see how does that work, and apply a bit of mathematics into it, and process improvement, as Jennifer mentioned there as well. Then from there, I went to Cork, right? I went to Tyndall National Institute in a research and development department there in photonics. So that was then, let's say, kind of closely related to electronics, but not as much as electrical engineering, because there was photonics, right? Which means basically you're transferring data with light, right? So there's no copper kind of loss of, heat and so on. So it's a bit more optimal kind of energy transition, which is pretty good for data centers and so on. So that was during my second year summer. And then third year co-op placement, I did it in analog devices in a technical sales, right? So basically I was part of the team which was talking with clients and, trying to see, okay, if they have an issue, what actually system are they looking for, in power actually systems, electronics. So I did a bit of electronics, and I did a bit of solar panels and this combined heat and engine power. So it did give me an idea, basically, how is it to work on site and in the lab as well. So here I am on site now, actually liking this.
Excellent. And Jennifer, would you say when you were interning, you were getting very much hands-on experience as well?
Definitely. And I think that's probably the best way to learn, to apply what you're learning in university in a real world situation, because you can hear all of these concepts on paper and do exams on them, but until you see them in practice, it will really stick. And I think they really stands to you going from, especially changing internship location, not staying with the same company, but changing maybe every summer to a different company, because you're going to see it from a different perspective and you're going to see maybe a new approach. And I think that's great experience then to have on your CV going to look for graduate jobs once you finish college.
Yeah. And it's great for you as well, because you're meeting new people and having new experiences in new places and everything. It's very exciting.
100%.
Engineering is a huge field. I mean, it's just one word, but it covers so much. I mean, Jennifer, how do you explain to people just how big engineering is?
I think it's really difficult. And I think especially with mechanical engineering, when you consider my class and the different types of roles we've all come out of university. And I'm in the pharmaceutical industry. I know people in the automotive industry, people who are in kind of medical device industry with a mechanical engineering degree. So it's so broad, and you'll have people going into aerospace. Like, the opportunities are really limitless with an engineering degree. So I think for anyone with a curious mind and of a curious nature, you can kind of shape your career to be any sort of industry you want. So you're not shoehorned into a specific category. So it is really great.
So if somebody is listening to this at the moment and they're just facing the leaving cert and they're making these big decisions about college and stuff like that, and engineering just looks a wee bit too big, what kind of advice would you have for them?
Oh man, I think if you're of a curious nature and you like STEM subjects, so you like your maths and your physics and that type of genre, your chemistries, I think engineering is really good. I think it can be what you want it to be. And I think don't be afraid of knowing exactly what you want to be career-wise. When you're doing your leaving cert, you have 4 or 5 years in your degree to work on that, to decide, to get internships, to see what you do and don't like. So I think don't be afraid of it, because it's this massive field, but I wouldn't be afraid. I wouldn't let that put you off, and I wouldn't be afraid of that.
So if you're the kind of person who gets a kick out of figuring out a problem and fixing it, engineering is definitely something.
I think so. Yes, definitely.
And you never know where you're going to end up, because Denis is in Finland.
Yes.
He's from Croatia. He studied in Limerick. Was it, Denis?
Yep, exactly. I don't know how to even describe it, like, how did I even end up in Finland?
I heard a great phrase from somebody, and when I think about all of the people that I know in my career and that I have met, it's true. And the phrase is, where you start is not where you end up. It's true for everybody. So it's just stages. You start this and then you just go on an adventure after adventure after adventure. God knows where you're going to be in whatever 20 years time. So just have fun and enjoy yourself, like the pair of you are at the moment. Jennifer, you mentioned STEM skills. How important are the STEM subjects at school for engineering?
I think from a university perspective, I think going from leaving cert to university for a mechanical engineering degree, I think definitely strong math skills are definitely important. Like, in terms of modules for, I didn't study chemistry in my leaving cert, but we had chemistry modules at university, but it was kind of taught in first year to a quick version of the leaving cert. So, and I took physics, so those who studied chemistry were able to, give me a hand and show me some chemistry tips and tricks, and I had physics tips and tricks that I was able to share with those who did chemistry who mightn't have done physics. So everybody helps each other in college, so I wouldn't let it put you off if you don't have these extra subjects.
Denis, would you agree that, kind of like STEM is important, but it's not everything?
Yes, I would say so. Yeah. The thing is, I've been with Engineers Island for a while, right? And we've done this promotion, on open days and so on in universities, in visit to the companies, and also through this like a young engineering societies and stuff like that, basically, right? And when you interact with young people, right, they always say, I'm not really good at maths, I'm not really good at physics. And I'm like, it doesn't really matter, if you, keep pushing, right? That's, you might not even need it eventually, you will need it in university and so on. But later on, it's not like, if you don't really love maths or physics, you're not going to end up in engineering. You will, there's so many like engineers around that, you learn as you go, and the application for the maths that you learned in secondary might be, most likely the maths that you're going to be using on sites and so on. It's mostly Excel sheets, formulas and stuff like that we are using a lot. Like, believe it or not, you don't really do calculations yourself. You just get, ChatGPT to do it for you. You get Excel to do it for you. You do calculations in the software that calculates things for you, Whether you're designing like some electrical engineering plants or something like that, it calculates literally, okay, you need this, you need that, So it's more, I would say, as Jennifer mentioned as well, it's more like a curiosity is what you need, right? Resilience, right? Don't give up, if you fail, keep going, right? And also, try to see, if I cannot do it one way, is there another way? Like, That's why I like maths. I don't love it. I must say that I don't love maths. Not my favorite. Physics, it's interesting because it's more kind of hands-on thing, at least in my how my brain works, right? But you don't have to love maths, but you need to see that, okay, there's multiple ways to get to the solution, right? So that's what people need to remember. It's not all about, oh, if you don't love maths, engineering is not for you, or if you don't love STEM, keep going, and you will learn as you go.
One of my favorite interviews on this podcast was with a lady who's now a CEO of her own company. And I asked her, how did she get into engineering? And she said she saw a guy working on a bridge, driving a really nice car. And she went, ooh, what does he do? So that's why she got into engineering. But that's my point, is there's all this kind of emphasis on STEM, and you have to be a walking brain and numbers and all kind of, not really, no?
To a degree, you have to definitely have an affinity for,
yes,
for math and for science.
But you don't have to be Einstein.
No, you don't have to be Einstein. And problem solving and kind of being willing to look at a problem and think about all the different ways you could approach it. Not necessarily the most obvious way might necessarily be the best way. So, and I think what Denis said was true as well, with you learn so much on the job. And because engineering is so broad, it's hard to teach you exactly what you need to know at university, because everyone in your class is going to be going into a different role. So a lot of the training you get will be on the job, and that will really be what stands to you.
Let me ask both of you. I'll start with Denis on this, kind of getting away from the college side of things to getting a job, right? The one thing that I hear over and over is there's not enough engineers. We need more engineers. We have to get more engineers into the system. Did both of you find getting a job easy? Denis?
That's a good question, actually. I would say easy enough, yeah. I had a few different internships, and I think that boosted kind of my LinkedIn or CV, that boosted it for sure. I was also proactive in some volunteering groups, a bit of leadership experience previously, and so on. So, that boosts as well. And communication is the key, Engineering, yeah. If you have any, send me an email and I'll recommend them to the HR, no problem, We need engineers in every sector, I would say. So as you know yourself, like I studied in Limerick, right? And Limerick was a few years ago, like one of the top 5 cities for the direct foreign investment for the growth, So companies were expanding. Companies are still expanding. Cork, for their pharmaceutical, very known, and, Dublin for business and all other sectors, of course, So, the country has good kind of incentive on these taxes, right? So that's why companies are coming in. And as companies are coming in, someone needs to do things, not necessarily manufacture, right? But maybe design, maybe, try to optimize, try to, have some more sustainable approach. So there's a lot of new engineers, for example, in the last few years, even through Engineers Ireland, we can see a new charterships, right? Chartered renewable engineer and so on.
Jennifer, can I ask you the same question? Do you find it easy getting a job? Is there lots of choice out there for you?
I think there's so much choice. I think with engineering, Ireland, there is so many companies investing in Ireland. Ireland has, I think, is it 13 of the top 15 pharmaceutical companies. So for me, there was so much choice for going into the pharmaceutical industry. But there's a lot of major medical device companies here as well. And there's loads of civil works and other industries that are throwing opportunities at engineers. So I think going to career fairs at your university is so important. I think that's a great way. Networking is, I think, the way that most people will successfully find their jobs. Being on LinkedIn, if there's a particular role you're looking for, maybe getting in touch with the people in the year ahead of you that might have gone into that industry, asking them how they got their role or who's HR in the company they're working for. Be proactive about getting a role. And then I think, no job is going to fall into your lap. I think you do have to be proactive and put yourself out there. But the jobs are there, definitely.
When it comes to networking, it's a big scary world when you're just starting out in university or you finish up in secondary school. Tell me if you agree with this. I eventually discovered that networking is about people you've met, not people you know well, just people you've met.
People you've met. You don't have to be best friends with everybody, but making sure people know you're out there, making sure people know that you're trying, that you're looking for opportunities. People are delighted to give people opportunities because we were all starting off once too. Everybody had to start somewhere, even people who are at the very top of the food chain, who are CEOs, who are HR managers and all the rest. That everybody had to start somewhere, and everybody had to rely on somebody else giving them a chance and giving them an opportunity. And people are delighted to give college students internships because they want to see growth and they want to hopefully see you come back to them.
Dennis, Jennifer, I've got a tough question for you, but I'll make it easy with just asking for a yes or a no answer, all right? In your experience for yourselves, Dennis, is engineering a well-paid job?
I would say so.
Jennifer?
Yes, I'm not complaining.
The next thing I was going to ask you about was when you're transitioning from college, because college is all about theory and internships is great, you get hands-on experience, but then when you're actually in a job and all of a sudden you have a title and you have responsibility, what are the things that you have to, or give me an example of one big thing that you had to learn like really fast in the job that you weren't expecting? Jennifer.
Ooh. I'm trying to think. I think liaising with people and being trusted with a project and being kind of expected, being given some instruction and then kind of being expected to go off and do it yourself. In college, you're given these very kind of predefined instructions and these predefined rules. When you get into the world of work, things can't be as set in stone as they would be in university. So that you have to be able to use your own initiative and to be able to, again, problem solve, think about how you're going to complete a project start to finish. So I think definitely the kind of flexibility that's available is very different to get used to.
And Dennis, for you, what did you have to learn really fast on the job that you didn't pick up in college?
One thing that comes to my mind actually now is to, chase people. People are busy. Everyone is busy and you're new to the role. So, chase people for answers. Try not to just send emails, but rather go on a call and see what is the best approach to get what you're looking for, a communication in one way or another,
Have you had an experience, Dennis, where you're starting out and you're kind of going, I can't ask that, that's a stupid question. And then you did ask the question. What happened?
Yeah, that happens, but I try to always, it is that there's a truth behind, like, it's always easier to ask someone who is closer to your role than, like, let's say manager or someone. You always ask colleague or someone your similar age or something like that. So that helps with approach, of course. Yeah.
Tell me about the other side, because engineering sounds like the most amazing career in the world. On the other side of it then, what's the hardest or most frustrating parts of being an engineer? Dennis?
That's a good question. I suppose sometimes the stress of, you want to get project across the line, for example, and it's not just you who needs to do things, right? There's a lot of, let's say, strings in a wheel, that would help to turn this wheel. So sometimes the parts won't arrive on time. Sometimes, for example, with the traveling across multiple countries here in Europe, there's different national regulations, there's different quality, So sometimes it's not like as you initially imagined that things would go smooth, So I would say that would be the kind of the tougher thing. But, with people who are from that country and so on, they would exchange those experiences. Yeah.
Cool. And for you, Jennifer, what's the hardest or most frustrating parts of engineering?
I think, one of the most amazing things about engineering is problem solving. I think sometimes that's the most frustrating part as well, is when you're looking at a problem and you're trying to figure out what the best solution is, because you'll have loads of ideas, but sometimes you'll get a little bit down the way with one and then you'll be like, oh, we can't do that because of this, or we can't do that because of that. So problem solving, I think, can be the most frustrating part, even though it can be the most beautiful part of engineering.
Dennis, would you have an example of kind of a tough project or a problem that you had to encounter and you went, whoa?
Yeah, well, from thinking on my feet now quickly, as I was working in Norway, actually, right, on this project, which I cannot discuss, due to NDAs and stuff like that, of course. But, a few things that we ran into there was just the difference, how things are done in one country compared to other. That's something that, was frustrating. Oh, we don't do it here like that, or actually we need to do it like that because it's per the national regulations and so on. And, there's few other things, similar to that, because in Norway was a bit different role than what I'm doing now in Finland. I'm commissioning engineer in this project, and I was like an quality on the previous project. So basically in the previous project, you really need to make sure that things are as they should be, right? And are they company standards? Are they national standards? Are they client standards? So like keeping you don't want to really show, okay, this is our final product, show it to the client if, all these other criteria are not met. So, that was kind of frustrating. Okay, who should I ask about these informations and so on? So just kind of ensuring that things are as they should be without having answer to it.
Gotcha.
Would be, you're not sure, should I ask this question or not, because you're not asking your colleagues, you're now going to clients and so on. So that was a bit tough, but we figured it out.
Jennifer, Dennis, let me ask you both about the work-life balance, because often when you're thrown in on a new company, everything gets landed on your desk. Let the kid do it. What's your experience, Dennis, with work-life balance?
That's a good one. That's a good one. I'm not sure now if it would be how I imagined at the beginning. At the beginning I started working in the office and it was good. You'll finish up with your, half 4, 5 o'clock, and you're done. But when you're on site, it's a bit different. There is few things are coming late to the site. A few things you need to really, catch up because we have certain deadlines and so on. You are compensated for all of that time, right? I'm happy for that. But like sometimes, that piles up, but, luckily the company has a good, incentives and so on to kind of compensate for all that kind of time invested. So I think there is a balance, but you need to be self-respectful and you need to put some limits,
And the balance is almost kind of there because, as you said, you were working in an office for a period where it was nice and regular. And then when you're actually on site, I would imagine it's all encompassing. What else are you going to do in Finland when you're 2 hours north of the Arctic Circle? What about for you, Jennifer? Because you're kind of just North Dublin, kind of a more regular scenario. What's the work-life balance for you?
So I think because I'm in manufacturing, so I'm kind of split between being in the office and then having to go and be in and around the floor in production. So there are going to be days where you're going to have to stay late and put in those extra couple of hours to get a project over the line. And that's just inherent in engineering. But again, you are rewarded, appropriately for such. And like, if you enjoy your job, you don't mind an extra hour or two. But I think, as Dennis said, it's very important to set boundaries sometimes and don't, make sure that you're looking after yourself, because at the end of the day, if you're burnt out and stretched too thin, you won't be able to show up at work for your regular hours, let alone an hour or two extra here and there when it's needed. But I think companies are very accommodating. Like there's times where I've had to stay late to get things over the line, but I'm leaving. I've said I've had to leave on time today because I graduate tomorrow, so I need to get back to Galway. So again, when you do work for them, they'll work backwards for you. So I think everybody looks after each other at work. So I wouldn't be too afraid of not having a very healthy balance.
Tell me about ambition and moving up the ladder. Are there things in place in the companies that you work with where there's a process you can go through or mentorship programs? Jennifer?
So in AbbVie, I'm on a rotational program. So every year for the first 3 years, I'll rotate job position and job location. So they've got 5 sites in Ireland. So my first rotation is here in Dublin in manufacturing. So I could be in a quality role, I could be in a global role next year, I could be in Sligo, I could be in Cork, Westport. The kind of possibilities are very varied, but they run that program so that you can get a really broad understanding of production in AbbVie, how different pharmaceutical lines run, to allow you that kind of help to get experience dealing with people, dealing with maybe the financial aspects of budgets, dealing with timelines, dealing with production. So it's in AbbVie, they really look after making sure people have a broad experience so that you can grow and professionally develop. Like they sent us to Chicago 2 weeks ago for a conference so that all of the graduates could meet each other across operations, across the finance program, across marketing. So in AbbVie, the opportunities for networking and for professional growth are really amazing.
Dennis, I'm guessing it's something similar with yourself, because you've mentioned you've been working in several different locations. Can I ask you about Engineers Ireland, because that is kind of like a support group for engineers. How have you or have you even found it useful?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Yeah, so similar to Jennifer in relation to the, progression. Yes, of course, there's incentives. And, I also try to do in the evenings in my own free time, just some kind of online courses, that might help out eventually, and that might, teach me a thing or two. So it's not just what company gives you. It's also like, it's learning never stops, right? So I would also suggest for people, in their early career to give it extra mile if possible, in the evenings or something like that, and achieve some certificate. So, company recognizes that actually, it's not just that, they wrap up their work and they go home, no matter if you work 11, 12 hours, there's extra mile that you put in that no one asks you for, right? So, but in relation to Engineers Island, yeah, absolutely. I have found it useful. I've been a member actually since 2021. So I was basically involved during the COVID times because I was looking for a kind of community for engineers. And I found one through, Engineers Island. So basically integration, as I'm Croatian as well, into the, Irish community through volunteering and stuff like that. So yeah. There's these young engineering societies, where the youth kind of comes together, organizes some events, and they're also part of like a senior committee in the region. So you get to know regional senior professionals. Some of them you might be working with, but you're not even aware that they are part of this like a committee, which happened, which is amazing. Yeah, and then there's also like national young engineering societies, where like you go for a Christmas party to Dublin, who you never know who you're going to meet there, right? And they're organized by young engineers, and there's young engineers coming from Galway, from Waterford, from Clonmel, and so on. So I met, brilliant engineers across, the country who I still, am in touch with just because I went to some event that Engineers Ireland invited me to. And it gives you good leadership experience as well, if you're interested in that, where I actually ended up leading those small groups, organizing those events. And, and then through Engineers Island, I found out that there's European kind of scale, organization for young engineers. So, a bit more international traveling, of course.
And Jennifer, how did you find Engineers Ireland was useful to you?
I think so. So I was a student ambassador for Engineers Ireland back when I was in second year of college. And I think that gave me the opportunity to plan events, network with those in Engineers Ireland. And that gives you huge visibility. So I organised a pub quiz and talks as part of my experience as an ambassador. So those are soft skills that help you when you're looking for jobs, that, they can see that you were organising events, that you're not shy, that you're very comfortable speaking. And that goes a long way when it gives you something to talk about in an interview that sets you apart from maybe the rest of your peers. And that kind of, again, piggybacking off what Denis said, that you don't just finish and wrap up your work and do nothing else, that you're being proactive about kind of getting involved in engineering.
But it seems to be the kind of industry where you just enjoy it and you're surrounded by people who think like you and enjoy the same things as you. So it's very easy to get on with people. Let me wrap up our conversation today. I'm going to imagine that the person who's listening to our podcast and earwigging on our conversation is going, engineering sounds good. I think I'm going to go for this. What one piece of advice would you give to somebody who's thinking positively about engineering, about getting into it?
I think especially for any young girls considering a career in engineering, I wouldn't let stereotypes hold you back. There won't be a huge amount of women in the field, especially in mechanical engineering. I think there were 12 girls out of a class of 98. So we, 10% give or take, which is a small cohort of female engineers. But I wouldn't let that hold you back. When you go into the world of work, there will be more, and we see the number increasing the whole time. But don't be afraid to get involved and put yourself out there.
Cool. And Denis?
10th conference, right? That's kind of innovation that there is in that kind of branch or something like that, right? So there is, if you're interested in law, if you're interested in engineering, if you're interested in any type, right? Try to find some events related to that, right? You don't have to make decision, I need to do that because, I attended so many events. No, just try to see how do you feel in that community. Is there things that you're curious about? Because it's all about your curiosity, right? I hope that, everyone is curious about something in the world, right? Like I used to spend hours and hours on YouTube watching, real engineering videos, and they compact all these kind of conferences, let's say kind of presentations in such a 5-10 minutes video where they explain what is inside that kind of thing. And that's what actually, got me into engineering. Even when I was younger, I used to, just get a screwdriver, open that toy, just to see what is inside, how does it work, So I'd say never stop being curious. That's my angle here.
The pair of you make engineering sound very exciting, and I know from experience that it is, and lots of travel. Dennis was talking about NDAs. It's a huge amount of variety in there. All you need really is to be someone who likes solving problems to get involved. It's fantastic. Let me thank both of you. To learn more about Jennifer and Dennis's work, you can check out links to their profiles and the Engineers Ireland Young Engineers Society in the description area of this podcast. But for now, Jennifer Smith, Manufacturing Operations Engineer at AbbVie, and Denis Hardi, QA Engineer at H&MV. Thank you both so much for sharing your graduate experience with us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed hearing about these real life stories that we had for you today. If you know a student or a young engineer who would appreciate these insights, please do share this podcast with them. All they have to do is just search for Engineers Ireland wherever they listen to podcasts, on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever. This episode was produced by justpod.io for Engineers Ireland. For advanced episodes, more information and the latest trends in infrastructure or career development advice, you'll find a wealth of resources on the website at engineersireland.ie. Until next time, from myself, Dusty Rhodes, thank you for listening.